Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this third week of our Anxiety to Rest Sunday School class. We're excited to be here, looking forward to hearing what we have to present this morning. This morning we are going to be introducing Dr. Susan Myket. She's one of our own. She is a clinical psychologist and runs an organization that ministers to children, adolescents, and families here in Naperville. She and a number of our other congregants here at New Covenant Church have put together a number of videos that they've made available for us. You can find those on Facebook. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Susan.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Let's open in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for bringing us together on this beautiful day. I pray that you would help us to hear and understand what you have for us today. Help us to look to the younger among us and know how to come alongside and support them as families in a community and to reach out to others for your glory in Jesus' name. So the first week in our series, we heard about the biblical grounds for rest. And we heard about it through the Old Testament, or the First Testament, as Dr. Dan Block would say, through the New Testament. And then last week we heard from Yusuf about his and his family's experiences in another culture, high anxiety in another culture, and how God was faithful to him and his family. This week we're going to get very practical. And we're going to talk about how to understand and how to help the younger among us as a community, particularly in this vulnerable time. So if something doesn't make sense as we're going through, sometimes I talk fast, just shoot up your hand, but I'm also going to leave time at the end for questions. So it may surprise you to see that anxiety is in the list of the top 3 reasons that people access physical care. We're talking pediatricians, internists. It doesn't surprise me at all. When I train new doctors that come to the practice from other states and other places, I'll tell them anxiety in Naperville is high, and this is pre-COVID. Anxiety is very high here. It's high because historically some families would commute to the city, to Chicago for work, and all that disruption causes to a family's time. Also, Naperville is seen as an area where companies bring in middle management folks, train them, and then in a couple years ship them out to other areas, other states, other countries. So there's a lot of disruption for families, both coming into the area and then kids losing their friends as they move away. Also, as you know, our local school districts, 203, 204, here in Naperville, there's a high focus on academics. Very rigorous, both in academics and in sports in this area. The schools, travel teams, they're willing to take as much time as families would give them. So very intense in this area. And then lastly, there's this drive that I hear daily, it seems like, for kids, for children, especially teenagers, to have items on their resume for colleges. To look at experiences, to look at serving the community, only to just keep adding to that endless resume to get into a school. So these are the anxieties that our community is bathed in. It may surprise you to know that anxiety has surpassed depression. Actually, some figures show anxiety is twice the rate of depression right now in the United States. 2017 figures, which we now know are out of date because of the last year or two, show anxiety in teens at 32%. So there are many different ways of treating anxiety. We're going to talk today about non-pharmacological treatments, so not medicine. We're going to talk about therapies for anxiety. And there's all sorts of labeled anxieties across the ages, from separation anxiety and specific phobias through generalized anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, social anxiety, panic, many varieties. Often it's our smarter kids that are the most anxious because they can think of all of the what if, endless what if questions, and they might not be emotionally ready for the questions that their mind presents. Don't buy into the thought as parents, as grandparents, as a community, that anxiety is just a phase for kids, that they're going to grow out of it. Anxiety is something that usually worsens over time if left alone, if not treated, because anxiety is internal. We can't see what's going on in a child or teen. And so if you're just letting it be and hoping they'll work themselves out of it, that usually doesn't go well. And they also miss out on different developmental stages as they're highly anxious. It doesn't make sense to leave it alone when there are effective ways to treat it, and when we as a community can support kids in learning to work through it. And then another thing is we really want to focus both here this morning and going outward on destigmatizing anxiety, being able to talk about it as a problem and being able to provide help and support. So what does anxiety look like in these ages? You can see the list. I'm putting this up here specifically because identifying anxious youth is a responsibility of parents, of grandparents, aunts, uncles, mentors, youth leaders, teachers, the church, the community. We want to watch for these things. I want to draw your attention to the third item here, which seems a little bit out of place. But kids, children, and other ages, sometimes anxiety comes out in anger and behavioral issues, and that's simply because sometimes being mad feels more in control than being scared. So don't assume a child that's acting up doesn't have anxiety that they're struggling with. And we want to watch for other struggles that might be going along at the same time with anxiety, that might run together. So other types of anxiety disorders, depression, eating disorders, sleep disorders, substance use, irritable bowel syndrome, migraines, ADHD. There are a lot of things that run together with anxiety, particularly anxiety that's been let go for a time. So what is going on in our anxious kids and teens? We're going to talk about anxious feelings, anxious thoughts, and anxious behavior. So anxious feelings. Anxious kids are pumped up. They are full of adrenaline coursing through their body. And if you think back to probably high school science class with the fight or flight syndrome, this is what's happening in kids. Their body is reacting as if there's a crisis, as if an alarm went off. And they're getting all sorts of symptoms, physical symptoms that go with that. Which would be great if you were walking down a dark alley alone at night and you heard footsteps behind you. Your heart would start beating really fast, and that would push blood to your arms and your legs so that you could run away fast. You would sweat to keep you cool so you could run farther. Your breathing, you would just be gulping in air again so that you could get away safely. Your pupils might even dilate so that you could see clearer at night. All these physical, God-given things happen immediately at the drop of a hat when this system gets triggered. But the problem is, kids are sitting in a test or they're trying to approach a group of friends and they're having all these physical reactions. And because there's no crisis, there's no fire alarm, there's no emergency for them to put all these physical symptoms toward, they're left feeling all of them. And that's a lot. The other thing I want to draw attention to in children and adolescents, the mind-body barrier, the difference between our thoughts and feelings and the physical is very thin, often razor thin. So kids will have anxious thoughts and feelings and they'll immediately roll to physical responses in their body, stomach aches, headaches. Anxious kids have anxious thoughts. And they tend to show several thinking errors. They overestimate. Can you see over there okay?
I think this side of the room is having trouble because you're standing right in the middle of it.
Let's see if we can switch here.
Can you shift the podium into the other side?
On the other side of the computer.
Thanks for letting me know. Okay, how is that?
A little more, please.
More.
A little bit more.
Why don't you move?
How's that?
That's better.
Okay. All right, so as we were saying, anxious kids and teens often overestimate how likely a negative event is to happen. They overestimate how bad the consequences will be if it does occur. And they underestimate how well they are able to cope with their anxious feelings and anxious situations. And this last year has only intensified anxious thoughts for many. Think of what the news and all the conversations going on have exposed, from every angle, have exposed kids and teens to. And they often, as we'll get into, don't have the ability to process all of those anxious thoughts and all of that anxious information coming at them. As you can see, a couple of examples of thoughts that I listed, the quality and intensity of these thoughts may be different than the ones that you have. And then anxious kids and teens show anxious behavior. Principle here is they avoid. They avoid situations that make them feel anxious. And the problem here is by avoiding things, they don't learn that they could face the situation or circumstance and get through and be stronger on the other side. And not only do they avoid, but they also rope us in as parents and teachers into providing them reassurance. They don't like how the anxious feelings feel, and so they ask you for reassurance. Promise me that this won't happen, or can you tell me that this is going to happen? And they're often just very creative because they don't want to face those feelings, and so they farm them out to you. But the problem is this can create a cycle, a parent-child cycle, where they are less and less able to face their anxiety, and they're going to you more and more, and it is affecting the relationship, and it is not helping them work through. In fact, the more reassurance we provide, the more likely we're going to need to provide reassurance in the future, and the less likely they're going to be able to cope with these feelings and ride them out. And then in the middle here, I just want to draw attention with the younger ages, and sometimes not, you'll see the anxious behavior in fidgeting, distraction kind of things too. So what's behind all of this anxiety in our youth? There's physiological changes going on. Our kids may be bright, but they are still developing. And that brain development is not complete until they're 25. And so, you can see the list of challenges there. You know these in your homes. You can see them with your kids. You can see them as they interact with siblings. It's difficult to have empathy. It's hard to inhibit your impulses. So we need to think about what's all that's going on for our kids and teens at this time, and not talk to them like little adults. They're not there yet, and their brain is in a constant state of flux. There's also social changes that are going on. And this is one of the reasons why social distancing has been so detrimental in this age range. It's been even more complicated by the half-in, half-out nature of school and social interaction right now. You can see all the various ways that kids are impacted. I talked about being able to approach groups and being able to talk to others. You can see on the last line the various types of social media. I always feel like that line is out of date as soon as I type it. I think it's okay this morning. But all of this comparing is just magnifying the ways that teens and kids can see themselves as different from the group, and they're very distressed by it. There's a documentary called The Social Dilemma. It's on Netflix. Some of you have seen it. I would recommend it to you. It's really a story of how big tech explains how their stuff is addictive. And really, if we think about it as Christians, It's a distortion. It's called the social dilemma, and I'll reference it again a little bit later. But it really just, all of this social media distorts the true relationships that we were created for, and instead replaces it with anxiety and depression and worse. And this documentary was done pre-COVID, so I'd highly recommend it to you. The youth group has seen clips of it. Your teens probably know a lot of it, but for the general age of folks in the room, it would probably be very helpful if you haven't seen it. So I'm a psychologist, but I'm also a mom, and I am right here with you in terms of social media, in terms of screens. One of the things to be mindful of with all the social changes that are going on is how long kids are accessing their screens, as well as the content that they're accessing. The effects of screen on sleep are profound. It can have a cascading effect into their lives. And then there are changes in social pressure and influence. I highlighted the academic pressure, particularly in this area. Really, state schools limit their kids from 203 and 204 because there is just such an academic focus. You can see the different obsessions. I listed a few of society. These are all countercultural to how we see life as Christians. Thinking about independence and not mature godly independence, but there are entire TV channels and movies where the theme of it is your parents are stupid and you're smart, so you need to not listen to them and do life on your own. It's also a really tricky time right now, certainly where seeing friends, getting a driver's license, visiting college in person, getting a job, all of those things are hampered and changed. And so you can start to see the effects on youth growing up in this time. And they are certainly stressed by the same things that we are. Terrorism, violence in our cities, all of it. But our youth are seeing these stressors for the first time in their history. They haven't gone through 9/11. They haven't gone through various things like that. They don't have a history or a reserve to pull from. And so the stressors are coming to them, and they're coming in at an age where they're very much challenged and developing. And they don't have the cognitive capacity to see through to the long term. Their brain isn't there yet. They're not thinking long term. They're thinking today. And they're also not recognizing that all of the emotions churning within them may not be the same shortly. They might not even feel that way when they wake up the next morning. So how do these anxiety problems develop? There's some genetic involvement that increases a youth's chance for developing an anxiety disorder. What's usually inherited is the arousal level that's experienced in response to stress. So many of these students have anxious temperaments to begin with that make them more vulnerable and more emotionally reactive to situations. That's what's passed on typically. And then thinking style can play a big role in the development of anxiety. Anxious youth, as we talked about, tend to perceive things differently. They tend to perceive ambiguous situations as threatening. Think about the student that walks by a group of peers and the peers start to laugh. They think it's about them. And then avoidance, as we've already touched on, gives anxiety a chance to snowball. There was high anxiety for all of us at the beginning of COVID. But the ways of coping that have been suggested to us are ways that generate and promote and maintain anxiety. We have been taught to fear each other, and our youth have taken in these messages at a very vulnerable time. And then lastly, our environment. If someone around you, like a parent, is prone to white-knuckling it when they're driving on the tollway, you're going to grow up and think that the world is a dangerous place. Certainly if there's any kind of abuse in a home, that's going to create a vulnerability for kids growing up. That's going to create emotional issues. But going back to regular situations, many of us learn best by making mistakes. And the current parenting culture Involves a lot of helicopter parenting, a lot of lawnmower parenting, where we smooth the way for our kids so that they can just shine. And that is not helpful to them. That's not helpful from a confidence perspective, from a facing anxiety perspective. I heard this once and it really stuck with me. A baby chick trying to get out of the shell, if the chick is struggling and we tap the egg and try to help that chick get out, that baby chick dies, because the strength they need to get out of the shell is the strength they need to fly. We don't want to get in the way of that. Don't we instead want to teach our kids that we know the one who owns a cattle on 1,000 hills, and we can go to him at any time with our concerns? So what's a parent to do? Here I want to talk real practically to parents, grandparents, youth leaders, teachers, mentors, aunts, uncles, the community. So I'm going to say parents, but please hear all of yourselves in this. So drilling down, parents can be supportive. Firstly, it involves validating our youth feelings and experiences. Listen and let them know that you understand how they feel. Listen so that you understand how they feel. And I have in here, time together is like behavioral amoxicillin. So we think of amoxicillin, it's something to treat infections or problems or ailments. Think of your time together with your youth in that important way. And how often do you take amoxicillin? Daily. We also want to have great communication skills, good communication skills. So you can see with listening, and this is tricky and this is hard, but not offering advice, listening, focusing on getting what they are saying, reflecting back what they're saying to make sure that you understand it and to communicate that you're listening, and not asking questions, not stopping them, but encouraging them to talk. So a very practical example, you have a kid that comes home and says, I hate math class. So one option as a parent, you could say, oh, you're doing great in math. Or another option, oh. And the child continues, and Sam is just mean. What does that have to do with math class? You could say, or, And then the child comes out with, my best friend Taylor always spends the whole class ignoring me and talking to Sam. Have you tried? Or, wow, that must feel really bad. Which style is going to keep you talking? The goal is to get our children to speak, and our role is as a listener. We need to modify our language to help our teen open up more and more. You know, when we spoke earlier about destigmatizing anxiety, when we listen in our homes, we don't judge. This encourages our kids to share more. And then we can set expectations. We need to be clear. If our kids are not having to waste mental energy to figure out what we really mean, what we're going to say, what we're going to do, if both parents are on the same page, then they can approach life and face challenges in a more clear-headed manner. And then fourthly, we want to encourage responsibility and self-management, which is the opposite of stress and anxiety. So whenever kids can reasonably be responsible for something, let them. Teach them and then let them. Things as simple as choosing what time to do their homework and planning a family dinner. Wouldn't that be nice? You know your kid, you know what they're capable of. The more you and they see themselves as capable, the more they'll be able to take on and the more that they will mature. And then encouraging a healthy lifestyle and modeling living a healthy lifestyle. So early research in COVID showed two positive things that were happening in families. One, kids were getting more sleep. In the beginning, when all of school was remote, kids were rolling out of bed in time for school to start and they were getting more sleep. And that actually had a significant impact on teens. And the second positive in all of this that came out in the beginning was family dinners. There were more family dinners going on at the beginning of COVID, and that was good. Drilling more into the sleep, safeguarding sleep is critical. Poor sleep has a compounding effect. Social media and screen time right before bed is going to affect sleep onset and sleep quality. And there should not be devices in the room overnight. You wouldn't let a stranger in your child's room overnight, so why would their device be in there? Separate the alarm from the phone. There shouldn't be devices overnight. It affects sleep, which affects many, many things. The American Council of Pediatrics still recommends a maximum of 2 hours a day of all screens. They have not changed that. If you ask your local pediatrician, if they're at all plugged in, they will be honest with you there. So that flies in the face of all of the ways that we've done school, most of the ways that we've done school in this last year. For those of you that really want to see a depiction of screens and sleep deprivation on kids, again, I would recommend The Social Dilemma. Lastly, I want to highlight here, so important, the last line, parents tell me, and I can see it myself, when kids get to be around other kids in person, their whole mood and outlook changes. So please promote that in all of your roles. Okay, and when and where to seek help. So I always get the question, okay, when is it so bad that I need to reach out? So we need to always reach out to our families, to our extended families, to the church, to school, to other parents, to good neighbors, books, and then counseling when needed. So the question to think about there is if their emotional distress, if their anxiety, depression, what have you, if it's preventing them from being able to do something that they need to do or want to do. Like they're just not making it to school, or they're not able to make friends. Or the things that you know that they enjoy, they're not able to enjoy them at all right now. That's a clear sign. Just a quick highlight on a type of therapy I use with kids, teens, young adults, everyone. It's called acceptance and commitment therapy. For those of you that might know cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, this is like a third wave of that. And it fits very well with faith. So I like it. And just very simply, thumbnail sketch, we work on teaching kids to accept their thoughts and feelings and to stay in the present. To choose a direction that is in line with their values, their Christian values, their life values, and to take action. So, just explaining this practically, we can't wait until we don't feel anxious to participate in life. We have to participate despite feeling anxious, because we have lives to live. All right, so very straightforward for parents. We help kids identify their thoughts and feelings. We name those feelings. So for the littles, it's the basic 4, happy, sad, mad, scared. For kids a little bit older, you can go online, there's various cartoon feeling faces, anxiety, jealousy, you can certainly bring more in, but being able to name what feeling or feelings you're having and talk about your thoughts is extremely helpful. However, if your child is so upset that they can't even begin to talk with you, I would suggest something physical first. Remember the fight or flight system that we talked about earlier? If your kid is so pumped up that they can't even talk, have them run the stairs. Have them do jumping jacks. Do some push-ups. I can do about 4 and I'm exhausted. If you're out in public, go into a bathroom in the handicap stall and run in place with your knees high. Something to give all that adrenaline somewhere to go so that they can calm down and talk with you about what's bothering them. And then we want to talk and pray with them. Again, we want to listen and over time share and go to the Lord together. Growing up, my grandma did needlepoint. Tremendous large needle points all over my parents' house. This is my dad's mom. And she had a stroke when I was 2. So she did these needle points, and her husband actually threaded the needle. She did these beautiful needle points. But my favorite is this smaller one that I think my parents have in my old bedroom now. Simple little poem. Said the robin to the sparrow, "Friend, I'd really like to know why these anxious human beings rush around and worry so." Said the robin to the sparrow, "Friend, I think that it must be they have no heavenly Father such as cares for you and me." So growing up and imparting that wisdom, imparting truth to our kids. We know in Proverbs 22 to train up a child in the way that they should go, so when they're old they don't depart from it. We want to model going to God. We don't want to model having it all together as parents. We want to be honest and model that we need God every day, and we want to show them that, and we want to go to God with them. We're all sheep, and they need to see that, and we need to regularly go to the Lord together. And then we need to help our kids gradually face their anxiety. So very practically, grab a legal pad and jot down anything that's popping out of their head, any anxious thoughts and feelings. Write them down, list them, and then go back through and rate them. For a young child, maybe that's like low, medium, and high. You know, that's a low fear. Oh, that's a really high fear. So rate them next to each of the fears, and then put them in order. Quantifying fears and anxieties help kids see that everything isn't like an 8, 9, or 10 out of 10. You know, the younger kids, it's just low, medium, and high, but other teens certainly can rate feelings from like a 1 to 10 scale. So we want to help them see that there's a variety, that everything isn't a crisis. And then we want to help them creatively tackle them gradually. So this is developing like a simple hierarchy where, let's say they want to make friends. So what are the steps in making a friend, and what are those specific things they need to do, and how can you together creatively plan to face those fears in a stepwise, broken down fashion. And then you'll see I have rewards here, because this is really important for kids, for teens, and sometimes for adults. Kids and teens don't have that long range view. So they're not thinking, oh, if I make a new friend, I'm going to feel much better. So I'm going to go through the anxiety of stepping up to a conversation right now because I can see that it'll be great to have a friend in the future. No, their brains do not work like that. Having a simple reward for each step that they're tackling is going to keep them going. I mean, it can be really simple. Dessert, get to pick out a favorite meal, stay up 15 minutes later, extra book at bedtime. Simple things, but rewarding them along the way, walking with them through this. And then helping our anxious kids and teens move into life. So I want to talk specifically to any teens and kids in the room right now. God created you. He sent his son to die for you. And that is so that you can have a real relationship with him. He wants to walk through life with us each day on this adventure. And so for the 4-year-old that I might see in the practice that's always asking me, why, this is a time when you can ask God, why? Why is this happening? Respectfully, why, or what do you have for me in this time? This situation is happening at a vulnerable time in my growing up. What do you have for me to learn in this? Somebody told me that recently that we're in a real Psalms, Proverbs, ecclesiastical time, and I think that's really true. I think those books have been tremendously helpful in this time. There's actually a song, and I would strongly recommend Christian music in your homes, but there's a song I came across recently called Time by Christian artist John Lucas, and the simple chorus is, I don't know the end or tomorrow's story, but I have found the one who gives me rest, and I will make my bed in his promises, for he holds true when nothing's left. Expect that in the most difficult places of life, which may be in this time for you, he will rain down his blessings on us. There's a closeness with him that we don't often feel at other times. So lean into him. You know, Yusuf talked passionately last week about how to get through hard times as a community. So beyond the masks and the shots and the social distancing, we need to lean into God and we need to love and support our youth and our community. We need to love all of God's people, particularly this age range, and we need to reach out with that love to the community. We need to love the people that God loves. So I said I would save some time at the end for questions or comments. Who's got the first question?